So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. It's Saturday evening. It is 9 p.m. here in Warsaw, Poland, and I'm with Julian Flynn. He will be introducing himself, but today we're talking about a topic that people have asked me about before, and one that is controversial, but I believe needs to be discussed. And this is the topic of FGM. I don't think we'll necessarily speak out the whole, or should we, Julian, shall we say the whole term, female genital
mutilation? Yes, let's say it. Some people call it female genital cutting, but let's go for mutilation.
Yep. So briefly speaking, this is the practice of circumcision, but for women. And let's just say it's not just removing a little bit of flesh, although Muslims will make that claim. It's certainly is more significant procedure than that. And this is something that is not pleasant for women. And Ayaan Hirsi Ali is someone to listen to on this topic. But I'll let Julian introduce himself and let him take the lead on this one. So Julian, thank you for joining me this evening. Great to have you. Please introduce yourself. Tell us, just make the introduction and tell everyone what to expect today and how you got into this and so on.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Lloyd, and thanks for having me. My name is Julian Flynn. I've been researching the topic of FGM for about 10 years now, with a particular interest in its history, its causes, and its place in religious doctrine. And for the past 3 years, I've been with the Center for the Study of Political Islam International. I've been a researcher with them, and recently this March CSBII published 2 reports which that I was the lead author for into FGM. I suppose I could talk a little bit about why I'm interested, and as I was saying to Lloyd just a few minutes ago, I don't have an interesting story. It'd be great if I was married to a Somalian or something like that. But no, I became interested in FGM after a conversation with a colleague, and this is about 10 years ago. And at that point, I was already worried about political Islam, and the colleague, I listed a few things that worried me about Islam. And one of the things I mentioned was FGM. And this colleague, being a good, I think he probably read The Guardian and watched the BBC, he said, "Oh, no, Julian, FGM is nothing to do with Islam. FGM existed before Islam. Not all Muslims practice FGM. Some Christians practice FGM, and it's not in the Quran." And I went home and I had a look. I checked these, see if what he was saying was true, and I found all 4 of those were true. And I was sort of convinced, very briefly, that FGM was nothing to do with Islam. Except I've got a little bit of background in social sciences, and one of the things which is a good way of, there's sometimes some shortcuts, not to verifying something, but just to get you a bit more deep into it. And one of these things is to look at maps, and it's quite easy to access a map of a distribution of FGM, and it's very easy to access a map of a distribution of Islam. And the 2 maps that I looked at had a very, very strong correlation. Well, a strong correlation. And that straight away got me thinking, well, this can't just be a coincidence, not on this scale. And that's when I started looking a little bit more deeply into it. I started looking at the Hadiths, what Hadiths mentioned female genital mutilation, or female circumcision, as it's written in the Hadiths. And I found that there were Hadiths that mentioned it. And eventually I found out something which it seems that really nobody knows about, which is in fact the Quran, despite what is the mainstream narrative. If you type in FGM and Islam into any search engine, you'll get almost ubiquitous saying there's no FGM in the Quran. Well, that isn't true. And hopefully I'll be able to convince you of that.
Yeah, there's lots of things not in the Quran, like the names of Muhammad's wives, like the Shahada, the double Shahada, the how to do the 5 deadly prayers. There's plenty of things not in the Quran that are clearly come from extra Quranic sources, which are then equally valid, because how else would you know those things? A lot of the history is not covered, the geography, the details, they're missing. So, but this is a common dodge by Muslims to avoid anything embarrassing. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's also, I think I did perhaps discuss with you briefly, it is not only permitted in Islam for Muslims to lie, it is obligatory. If anything embarrasses Islam, they are to defend Islam, even at the price of lying. And Muslims will justify this by saying, for instance, if they talk about Muhammad in a misleading fashion to make him look good, it's not they're lying about Muhammad, they're lying for him.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. Very true. And you've got to be careful as well with what terminology you use when you're talking to a Muslim about FGM. For example, Ilana Omar, she's been asked about female genital mutilation, and she says she will condemn female genital mutilation. However, if somebody asked her about female circumcision or khitan, maybe she'd find it more difficult, because even the Muslims who practice female genital mutilation do not consider it as mutilation, and in fact, in the Quran, it does forbid mutilation, despite the Quran advocating various forms of mutilation. Well,
I mean, mutilation is a term I think that Western apologists would use to what's the word here, to bring attention to the act, to demonize it, as it were. I mean, rightly so.
Yeah.
Whereas Muslims would simply call it, well, it's circumcision, and they would always try to whitewash things that are actually very unpleasant. I mean, how else would they be able to survive in Western culture?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, personally, I have got into the habit of calling female genital cutting in my own research, and that's not because I condone it, but it's simply, when you're researching something, you've got to sort of take a little bit of a step backwards from the morality or the immorality of it. And also because a lot of the time, if you're researching FGM, if you're looking for fatwas, you can't be typing in female genital mutilation, or you can be you're having to search and think a little bit in their language. You have to adopt their mindset.
Mm-hmm. So how did you feel when you learned that this person had lied to you? Have you approached them since?
Oh no, this is a long. Yeah, I don't think he was lying. He wasn't lying. He wasn't a Muslim. He was a kafir, and a lot of these lies circulate through people who were sincere. If these narratives are ubiquitous in the debate about FGM, we used to know that FGM was supported by Islamic doctrine in the 40s or 30s. The Victorians knew this. They weren't. There was no doubt about that in their minds. It's since we've had a large Islamic presence in our societies that we've got to be. We do have to perpetrate these deceptions, and the mainstream narrative perpetrates these deceptions because it becomes, for political reasons, it becomes important to pacify the various populations, to help them live together. So the truth, we can't speak the truth anymore. This is why
it's information warfare. It's information warfare, suppression of truth.
Well, this is why sorry. No, so it's why when I'm doing research, I tend to go for books published in the 19th century. If you really want to know what's going on in Islam, the older books. I was reading Richard Burton's travels in Arabia, and he just tells you how it is. He doesn't try to present a nice face on things. He just tells you how it is. And other similar books. But if contemporary books on Islam, unless they're written by somebody who's clearly anti-jihad. There's just too much. There's too much covering up, too much sweetening of Islamic doctrine.
No, agreed. This is Islam QA, which is the largest Islamic advice site in the world.
Oh, I know it very well. Yeah.
And I just looked up female circumcision, and I mean, I guess we're going to find a host of opinions here, but medical benefits of female circumcision in Islam.
Well, Islam QA is very pro female circumcision.
Yeah,
it's got plenty of.
I mean, it's just that I'll quote this and I'll show Muslims, and obviously that's when they even engage with the facts. They're like, no, they're wrong. And it's like, okay, these guys they get up to 400 million visits a month. So then I'll tell, okay, so you are some random no-name Muslim called Random Muslim 69 on the internet. For whom is your opinion binding? Is it binding on the entire ummah or just for you? And here you've got Islam QA with its imams who are talking to up to 400 million Muslims a month or more. And are they lying? Are they wrong? Are you going to send a letter to the imam to correct him? Because, I mean, very often you'll find issues that are very controversial, but Islam QA will happily admit, yes, it's true in many cases. So it says, yeah, female circumcision is done by cutting a small part of the skin, but we know that's false. I mean, but it's certainly done. Now, if this is only cultural, why is it being referenced here on Islam QA? If it's just a cultural practice like the hijab, when it's, or the niqab, or what's clearly an Islamic practice, is prescribed in Islam. The fact that circumcision for women is prescribed in Islam is confirmed by the hadith quoted above.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's pretty blunt. I mean, it's like you don't have to go far to find the evidence. Now, here it's obligatory, here it's not obligatory.
Well, obligatory or recommended or even allowed is not the appropriate level of licitness for something like FGM. There's a famous fatwa by one of the deans of Al-Azhar University in Cairo, where he says, he criticizes FGM. He says it's not a good practice. It is not obligatory in Islam. And you think, well, hang on, not obligatory includes everything from highly recommended down to forbidden. If you meant forbidden or if you meant discouraged, why didn't you say that? Why have you said not obligatory? That's leaving the door open for highly recommended. And some schools of Islam, there's a couple of schools of Islam that do deem it as obligatory, but most schools of Islam have it as recommended or honorable or noble. For a good Muslim, something that is recommended or noble becomes obligatory. If your destination in the afterlife depends on you circumcising, cutting your daughter's genitals, and also the destination of your daughters in the afterlife as well, then it becomes obligatory.
Yeah, but why do you think they would deny this fact?
Well, they deny it because they're in a process of Islamization of non-Islamic countries, of kafir countries, and there are a few things which stick in the craw of our ethics, of our morals, and if one of them is child abuse, whether that is sexual abuse or whether it is physical abuse or psychological abuse, and female genital mutilation ticks all those boxes. And they know that it won't be accepted by the West, or the West will resist it, or it would be good if we resisted it. I've maybe got more to say about that, but certainly people are Westerners, non-Muslims, Kafirs, are rightly disgusted by this practice.
Yeah,
and
I think. Sorry, go
on. No, and it's a tactical thing. You won't get people denying that FGM is Islamic in Somalia or in Indonesia or in Guinea or in Oman, but they will deny it in Britain, in America, in France, in Australia.
So they deny it in the West, but they admit it in majority Muslim countries.
Oh, well, this is where the nuances come in, because it's true that not all Muslims practice FGM. And so you've got the Shafi school where it's pretty much, you're going up into the 80%, 90%, almost 100% in some places of Shafis practice FGM. Then you've got the Dawoodi Bohra where it's works out about 80% of Dawoodi Bohra's practice. So that's where they deem it to be obligatory. And then you've got sort of the Maliki school where it's generally considered as recommended or honorable, and it varies. It seems that the distribution of FGM amongst Maliki is quite, how can I say, it's patchy. It depends very much on, I couldn't say all the factors. But then you've got the Hanafis, and to be honest, I'm not aware of any Hanafi tradition of FGM. So, we're talking about Afghanistan, Pakistan, etc., etc. They don't. You do get FGM in Afghanistan and Pakistan. It's not. We don't have enough data on it to actually have a number. But I suspect very strongly that it's probably Shia minorities that practice it. But there's sort of roundabout evidence from refugees from Afghanistan in Iran. It was a survey done a few years ago where we found a lot of Afghani women had undergone FGM amongst these refugees. Now, the data isn't rich enough to really clarify that, but I suspect what it was persecuted Shia minorities in Afghanistan, escaping Afghanistan, coming to Iran, and because they were probably Dawoodi Bohras, these women had undergone FGM. So yeah, I'm not sure where we stand this, but it's not all Muslims. Not all Muslims practice FGM. In fact, well, I mean, if
it's also a matter of in the Sharia there's the doctrine of azima and rukhsa. Azima is strictness. Rukhsa is lenience. Now, it is permissible until the time that the world is fully under the dominance of the Sharia that there is this lenience that Allah allows. For some Muslims are not capable of being very strict, so Allah allows dispensation. So He judges them more leniently, and those who are capable, they apply azima, so they are very strict. So the Sharia allows for this, and there's a range even within the schools. So like the Hanbali school is more strict, and then you've got other schools that are maybe less strict. But all of these, even though there may be contradictory practices, they are still valid practices, and they're still valid for the Muslim.
Yeah.
So one school may not, at least certain people may not. Now, of course, everyone tries to make a deal about, well, not all interpretations of Islam, which is complete bogus nonsense. It's practice. So they're either following strictness or they're following dispensation. It's just a range between those. And this is defined in a doctrine called ikhtilaf, which defines the difference. So you still receive reward, you just receive less reward. So a Muslim that, for instance, eats pork, right, while in the West, is still practicing Islam. He's just practicing rukhsa. He's being lenient. And of course, as long as he maintains faith in his heart, he can do whatever he likes outside. And this is still good for Allah because it makes a positive impression of Muslims that they're adaptable, they can fit in, and it's like the Trojan horse. So there's also this, we have to look at the deception as part of the culture.
And I think that there's certain practices that Islam requires, which are to anybody who's got an ethical instinct are very difficult to do. Obviously, female genital mutilation is one of them, but things like jihad as well. It goes against people's human nature to want to go out and kill strangers. It takes a lot of indoctrination, it takes a lot to make somebody do that. The ordinary Muslim couldn't do it. And I think it's the same with FGM. So the fact that there might be some ambiguity whether it's recommended or obligatory means that most Muslims who don't want to hurt their children, who've got the same instincts as we have deep down, don't do it. They take it's recommended, but I'm not going to do it. It means it's not obligatory. So yeah, there's always that taking the easy way out or taking the moral way out rather than if it's that possibility, then
well,
they will
Islam
take it.
technically doesn't have morality in the same sense that
Oh,
we
yeah.
define it.
Yeah,
They don't have right and wrong. They have legal and illegal.
Yeah,
And
allowed
what is
and forbidden.
illegal
Yeah.
can be made legal through legal loopholes. Because the Sharia is a legal system, it's not a moral system.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So what made you want to discuss with me this topic with me? Well, what we're hoping I could also add to this discussion, and I'm glad you're sharing this with people. It's worth talking about. There's not much on it. There's a lot of confusion, and hopefully we'll clarify by the end of this so that everyone knows exactly what the stats tell us, what the information tells us. But
yeah. Well, I mean, I am an admirer of your work, Lloyd, and I know that you'll throw light on the subject, and we'll be able to have an interesting conversation, which goes in depth. And also, it's really about getting this out there because there's so much deception about FGM in the mainstream media, in the mainstream discourse, that it's important that people know this.
Yeah.
Not least because our countries. Okay, so I live in France. I'm half English, half French. I look at the statistics of what's happening in my two countries, and okay, the statistics they take a lot of interpretation. But for example, in the UK, 137,000 females. I call them females. It's not out of disrespect, but it's girls and women. And it's a bit of a mouthful, so I prefer to say females after a while because it gets a bit tiring. But 137,000 females have undergone FGM in the UK. Now, okay, you've got to be careful about that because not all of those girls have been subject to a crime, because possibly a majority of them were cut before they came to Britain. But even then, when you look at the statistics and you have to break them down a little bit, you have to do a bit of digging. There's a lot of FGM happening either on the soil, British soil, or happening what you call holiday cutting, where girls are taken in the long summer holidays back to their parents' countries. They're cut there, left to recover. They recover and they're brought back. So there's a hell of a lot. But the terrible thing is that, okay, we've seen the Islamic rape gang problem. We've heard a lot about that, quite rightly. And the most shocking characteristic of that, apart from the actual act, is the blind eye that's been turned to the abuse of those poor girls. The same thing's going on with FGM. From what I can tell, if a father sexually abuses his daughter and the police find out, he will be investigated, and if they can do a prosecution, they'll prosecute him. And if you look at the statistics, there's evidence for that. If a parent, a mother, physically abuses their child, breaks their bones or something, same thing. There's no leniency, quite rightly. But if a girl undergoes female genital mutilation and the authorities detect it, they turn a blind eye to it. It's not prosecuted. I think there's been one or maybe two prosecutions, successful prosecutions of FGM in the UK, but that doesn't reflect the number of cases of illegal female genital mutilation. I say illegal because, as I said before, not every case of female genital mutilation detected in England, in Britain, represents a crime. Some of it will be pre-migration, girls cut before they migrated to the country. Same thing in France, but France has a much better record of prosecuting female genital mutilation. But France, so really, it's.
Why do you think that is, though?
Why has France got a better record?
Yeah, well, and why is Britain so lax?
Well, France has got the principle of laicity. It doesn't. The closest you can get to it in English is secularism, but it's got this principle that the state does not recognize a particular religion, and that having a religion does not give you extra rights or protection in France. It's being attacked, but that is a principle. And this has meant that Islam has been able to make less incursions into French culture than in England. The way I see it, in England, every demand that Islamic made by political Islam in England is yielded to. Whereas in France, there's this bright line which everybody will notice if it's crossed. For example, with a veil, in France, the niqab, which a full facial covering, is illegal in France, and because it violates the principle of religious discretion in public spaces. This is part of laïcité, that you're supposed to be discreet about your religion in public places. So it becomes obvious in France when this is being violated, this principle is being violated, whereas in England, there's no such principle. And it means that there's this constant pressure that political Islam puts societies under. Political Islam is constantly pushing forwards, where in France, people.
You know, I know that it's part of CSPI's policy to use the term political Islam to distinguish between religious and political practices, which in Islamic terms is false. I mean, I do understand the rationale, and I understand that it's part of the practice with CSPI, but Islam doesn't see a difference. Because look, I come from the third world, right? And I was raised, shall we say, with feet in two different worlds, right? Your first world and your third world. I mean, I was educated, my final education was at a German school. So I understand, I see the world through two different lenses simultaneously. I understand the Western first world lens and I understand the third world lens. And I understand the desire to use certain tools and rationality and lenience and tolerance, and I get that. But I also understand that from the third world point of view, you abuse that tolerance. You abuse that rationality, because you're trying to use a system of understanding which doesn't fit with the other group. And Islam does not see itself as a political system and a religion, and we don't have a concept for that in the West. We can't wrap our minds around that. We don't see, because Islam is a political system. It is an everything system. So Islam sees itself as a deen. Let me just get so the deen is first and foremost a socio-political system, right? Or socio-political legal system. It's not a religion. So I'll just to give you my thoughts on this, because I understand that Bill Warner and the group want to make certain distinctions for others, but ultimately it's a false distinction, because it is not what Islam actually believes or thinks or presents or does. If you have a false view of it, you're going to deal with it in a poor manner. So the word deen, right? This is about existence, life, society, law, morality, you name it, everything. It's a complete and competing ideology, a system of life and society, but it is a political ideological system. So it is first and foremost, this is taken from Islamic documents, right, from their own view. It's a political framework for managing mankind's affairs. So first and foremost, it is a political system. So the linguistic meaning, if you look at the Al-Qamus al-Muhit and the Lisan al-Arab, these are the two most important, two most famous classical Islamic dictionaries. There are four meanings of the word deen. The first is subjugation and dominance, right, which is ownership. Possession is 9/10 of the law, right? We hear that in America. Government, administrative or legislative authority. There's not a hint of religion here. Obedience and bondage. That's slavery. So subordination and dominance under the power of others. Now, the author that wrote this, I got this, when he says others, he means everyone else under the power of the Muslims, and the Muslims under the power of the state, and the state under the power of the clerics, right? Rules, they're just theocracy. Rules and regulations, doctrine, ideology, tradition, and then an or religion, optional. And then reward and repayment at the end of the day for what you do. Now, if you look at this, so al-Din does not mean religion, it means obedience, right? This is a person who dominates and rules over a state. It comes from this term here, Dentuhum Fadanu, means I subjugated them, so they obeyed me. Islam is ruled by force. So, and it is someone who bears humiliation under subjugation and power over others, right? Now, if you look at this on a chart, this is where, and this is optional. So I know that we'd say political Islam, but it's not like there's no such distinction within Islam itself.
Oh yeah, I accept that. I think it's, yeah, I accept that. Really, it seems. I think everything is political in Islam. Ultimately political. Everything's ultimately political.
Look at the left. I mean, they've got the statement that the personal is political. They make everything political, which is basically an application of the Sharia, just in Western characteristics. It's the Sharia with Western characteristics. That's all it is. Yeah. Yep,
absolutely. I was thinking I've got a presentation where so this presentation it doesn't talk too much about FGM, about the nature of FGM. I'm assuming a couple of things in this presentation. I'm assuming that your viewers are all very knowledgeable.
Yeah, but remember, we're not only wanting to talk to PhDs and master's certificates people. You know, we want to make it as widely accessible as possible.
Yeah, I've maybe. Okay, we'll see. If there's anything I say which needs explaining, Lloyd, please interrupt me and let me know. Yeah. But I've also I don't talk too much about the nature of FGM because really there's just a couple of things you need to know about FGM. Which one is that Islamic FGM takes essentially three forms. There's a clitoridectomy, which is a cutting of the clitoris, either partially or completely. And it can also be the cutting of the clitoral prepuce, again, partially or completely. And then you've got excision, which involves a cutting away of a labia minora, and usually also it involves cutting away of a clitoris. And then you've got infibulation, which usually removes the clitoris, also removes the labia minora, and then it roughens the edges of the labia majora, stitches them together, and lets it heal. So there's a smooth covering over the vulva and the urethra, and it leaves a little hole for urination and eventual menstruation. And it's usually done to girls who are about 5 to 7 years old, before they're big enough and strong enough to be able to cause problems resisting. And also that there's a lot of terrible health consequences, both short-term and long-term. I mean, I won't go through them, but it is. It's a miracle that these girls survive. There's how can I say, the severity of the health consequences do depend on the severity of the cutting, and other factors such as the tools used. Generally, if you're using razor blades or broken glass, except sometimes there is medical, it's found to be medicalized in wealthier areas, parts of Indonesia. Anyway, so I'm saying that as way of introduction, really. But if would you be interested in me giving this presentation? It lasts about 25 minutes with a following wind.
Yeah, no, by all means, go ahead. Please.
Okay, so I'll probably be a few seconds as I'm getting this organized, getting it started.
Yeah. And for the audience, if you guys would share this, I think this is a very important discussion. It's something that people need to know about, as disturbing as it is. But this is the real. I have a little mosquito flying around, but it's quite disturbing. So please, if you'd share this on social media, let your friends know. Do obviously like the video. Let's get it out there. Let's have people talk about this. I think this is very important. Understand that once Islam does take over in the UK, it is going to look a little bit more like Afghanistan than people would like. Something like 65% of the mosques in the UK are Deobandi mosques, which are Afghanistani style mosques and beliefs. So yes. Iran went from being very secular, bikinis on the beach, to being covered in bin bags. The same will happen in the UK. It is not a maybe. And sadly, unfortunately, clearly there is pushback. There's popular pushback, although the government seems to be afraid to take that step. They rather will manage the decline than actually deal with the issue, because they don't want to obviously have an uprising. They don't want to deal with the fallout. But I think that at this point, the UK, it feels like a tinderbox. I think it's all of the official reports, all of the experts are saying the UK is a flashpoint. It is going to ignite. Give it a few years. There is going to be civil unrest, if not, well, you can't call it civil war, because civil war would be between the natives of a country, whereas this will be between foreigners and the natives. So this will be, well, whatever you call that. So, but I think if it happens in the UK, and it seems very likely that it will, the government is preparing for that. That is the formal analysis to my knowledge. Then I think we can see the same happening in Belgium, France, Holland, Germany, and other places. It will spread. Because also look at what's happening in Ballymena in Ireland now with this dissatisfaction. People are rising up, people are pushing back, and the lesson we learn is, well, when the local population uses violence, it is effective. Let's do more of that. That's pretty much the lesson you draw from that, because the political establishment did nothing, pleas, petitions, voting, and violence has worked. So I think this is kind of where people are being pushed into that corner, and they're being silenced. And once you are being silenced, when Muslim rapists and murderers are not jailed at all, or given light sentences and let out after 6 months, or they protest at the police station, and then they are not prosecuted. But if you send out a tweet that you delete afterwards because little girls got murdered, you get 31 months. People are looking at them going, well, if we can't say what we want, then of course, what are you left with? So yeah, sorry, the little off topic, but understand that this is important. We need to be able to discuss this, which is better than throwing bricks, which is better than civil uprising. So, and I think we need to talk about this, and hopefully politicians will pay attention. Hopefully the powers that be will actually come to their senses, and there'll be a political will. So yeah, let's go ahead.
Absolutely. Great. Thanks. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Lloyd. I think it's very true. We need to talk about this. Okay. So can everybody see the screen? Okay.
Yeah, I think you still have your above the screen. You've got your file, edit, view, insert.
Oh yeah. Okay. I'm not sure I can get rid of that. No.
Oh, really? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see the slides.
We might have to live with that. Yeah. Okay. So So in March 2025, this year, on the International Women's Day, CSBI published these two reports. This is a FGM index, which addresses two questions: how much FGM is there in the world, and how much of this FGM is Muslim, and how much is non-Muslim? Okay, so how much FGM? So the go-to statistic for quite a long time now has been UNICEF. And in 2024, they came out with a new estimate, which is 230 million. Now, this is a significant underestimate. There are about 100 countries in the world where FGM is known to be practiced. And this statistic is based on data from 31 countries. So we at CSBI, we thought we could do better than that. And our estimate is 291 to 304 million girls and women living with FGM today. To get this statistic, we use data from 77 countries. And also in the report, we include 20 countries where FGM is known to be practiced, but for which there's not enough data to calculate a country prevalence.
Where are the feminists? My body, my choice.
Oh, yeah. Well, there you go.
Such hypocrites and cowards.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, hopefully, we have to force them into confronting this issue. Okay. So what does this mean? 291 to 304 million females. It means that 1 in 13 girls and women in the world today have undergone FGM, some form of FGM. And 80% of this FGM is attributable to Islamic communities and 20% to non-Islamic communities. Now, that 20% shocks a lot of people, the fact that there's so much non-Islamic FGM, but let's see what that actually means. So this is how much FGM there is done by Muslims. 242.5 million Muslim females have undergone FGM, and 55 million non-Muslim females. And these are the respective populations of Muslims and non-Muslims. And we put the graphs together. You see that there's a huge disproportion in the rates of these two populations.
That is an incredible slide.
Yeah, thank you. I worked on that a lot.
Well, really disturbing.
So, another way of putting the same information is that 24% of Muslim girls and women have undergone FGM. These are rough figures. It is actually a range, but it works out. I think our average is 24%, and about 2% of non-Muslim girls, women have undergone FGM. So these are global figures. Okay, so where does FGM happen? So this is a CSPI map. The darker the blue, the higher the rate of FGM. You see, it might come across in the screen as pink. It's actually pink and white stripes. These are the countries where we know FGM is practiced to some extent, but for which there's not enough data to have a rate or a prevalence.
Outside of Islam, the balance of FGM practices are majority African, which is
well.
Is that true?
Okay, well, Indonesia, you're going to see in a few seconds, you're going to have a sort of answer to your question in a few seconds, because the highest rate of FGM is Somalia with 99%. But then the second highest is Indonesia with 87%. Now, Indonesia is a huge country. It's a huge country. It makes up, I can't say off the top of my head, but I think it's something like a third to a half of all FGM is attributable to Indonesia. It's a statistic.
It's a large country with a lot of Muslims. So.
Yeah, it's got a huge population. So, and also you've got Oman, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia has got a lot of FGM. So then you've got Guinea as a third country, 84%, Mali, 81%, and yes, and we've got Oman, which has got 78%. And maybe actually one country that interests me a lot, and I know that you've Saudi Arabia very well, Lloyd, is Saudi Arabia. It's a very interesting. It's a very mysterious place as far as FGM is concerned, but maybe we can talk about that.
Well, I mean, what are the rape statistics in these countries? Like, for instance, what are the rape statistics in Saudi Arabia? Probably close to zero, because Muslim men don't rape anybody, apparently, right? Or maybe they just don't record these numbers.
Well, there is some data about FGM from Saudi Arabia, but it's quite hard to interpret. But it'd be interesting to have a conversation about that. It's I'm fascinated by Saudi Arabia and FGM there. But here we've got a map of Western countries. And again, the same thing, the darker the blue, the more FGM there is, except the scale is different. And the highest rate of FGM is Sweden, with 1.29% of its female population having undergone FGM. Okay, so let's go. So that's basically those are our the main findings of the FGM statistical report. Some of these findings have never been done before. For example, the proportion of FGM attributable to Islamic populations. That's the first time that you will see this. Nobody else has done that. Okay, so we're going to look at FGM in Islamic doctrine, in the Quran and the Hadith specifically. And we'll start just by having a look at some of the vocabulary of FGM in Islamic doctrine. We've got essentially two words. We've got a khitan and we've got hafad. So let's define those words. So I'm going to use dictionaries of classical Arabic. That's the Arabic of Muhammad's time and afterwards, a few centuries afterwards. So khitan, circumcision of a boy and of a girl. This is from Edward Lane's Arab English Lexicon, a monster of a book, really.
I just used Lane's earlier for the Dean.
Yeah, it's an incredible work, isn't it? It's just it's almost insane the amount of detail he goes in, and but yeah, it's another one is Kazimierski, a French dictionary I've translated, to circumcise a boy or a girl, and then the Lisan al-Arab, to circumcise a boy and the maid. So khitan refers to the cutting, the genital cutting of the male and or of a female. Khafad, we're going to use the same dictionaries. She circumcised a girl applies only to a girl. To circumcise a girl, and he circumcised a girl, and it is like circumcision for a boy. Okay, so FGM in the Quran. Is there any FGM in the Quran? Other words, khitan or khafad, found in the Quran? No, they're not. But that's not the end of the story.
I just pause. Sorry, just a question from the audience. In these cultures, is men or women pushing for FGM? It's men, right?
Oh, well, this is a complicated question. It's a very good question. Well, afterwards, if we get time, could I talk a little bit about polygyny and how that causes FGM?
We have time. Please go ahead.
And I think that'll answer that question, or at least untangle the question, if not quite answer it. It's not as simple as men or women. I'd like to. It'd be great if we could discuss that. So yeah, these words are not used in the Quran, but this is not the end of the story. So let's have a look at this hadith. This is a hadith from Sahih Bukhari. So I heard the Prophet saying 5 practices are characteristics of a fitra: circumcision, shaving the pubic hair, cutting the mustaches short, clipping the nails, and depilating the hair of the armpits. Now, there's this word fitra. This is a very important word, fitra. What is in and also just to mention, we get the word circumcision from khitan. So fitra is the idea that humans and nature have an innate predisposition towards Islamic beliefs and behavior. So here we have a hadith. It's a Sahih hadith, for those who are interested, saying there's this thing called a fitra, and one of these is khitan. And as we've seen, khitan refers to the cutting of the male and the female genitals. So is fitra mentioned in the Quran? Okay, so there's a little search here I did on Quran X, and yes, it's mentioned once. It's mentioned just once, Quran 30:30. Let's see what Quran 30:30 says. So direct your face toward the religion, inclining to truth. Adhere to the fitra of Allah, upon which he has created all people. Okay, let's stop there. I'm sure that your audience have all put 2 and 2 together and made 4, because let's have a look. So it says Quran 30:30 requires Muslims to adhere to the fitra.
Mm-hmm.
Sahih Bukhari, this hadith says 5 practices are characteristics of the fitra. One of them is khitan. We translate it as circumcision. The dictionaries define khitan as circumcision of a boy and of a girl. Therefore, the Quran indirectly, but I would say inescapably, supports a practice or requires a practice of FGM. So this idea that there's no FGM in the Quran, it's literally true. There's no word for FGM. It's not mentioned.
Yeah, and that's just a sophistry. It's actually a dodge, but it's a sophistry.
Oh yeah, yeah. So if you hear somebody saying it's not in the Quran, correct them. It's supported by the Quran indirectly. Okay, so if this were true, if this analysis were correct, you assume that the scholars of Islam somewhere would confirm this. They dissociate the fitra and female genital mutilation. Okay, so Al-Muzuli, circumcision is sunnah and fitra. For women, circumcision is makruma, which means noble.
Can we just pause one moment?
Yeah, please.
You mentioned fitra and why fitra. Remember, it is the idea that humans incline towards Allah. Right, that we're all are born Muslim. For all intents and purposes, it is the claim, and it is said by Muslims, our souls are all Islamic. We're all born Muslim. And you mentioned Adam. I think you mentioned Adam there briefly, or it was in the Hadith. Did you mention that just before?
No, I did. No,
you mentioned the fitra. Okay. Yeah. So Adam is the first Muslim, but Adam is made this. Allah breathed the spirit, His spirit, into Adam. But the spirit that was breathed into Adam was created out of the spirit of Muhammad. And if Adam and that light passes on to all humans, so therefore your soul is part of the original spirit of Muhammad. Everything is made out of Muhammad. Your soul is made out of a fragment, a tiny fraction of Muhammad's soul. So this is the idea of the fitra. This is why it is everyone is a Muslim.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you need me to show that at all, but basically, Muhammad was created before Adam was even created. Muhammad existed as spirit before Adam was created, and then Allah breathed, according to the Sirah, Muhammad's light into Adam, his soul, the light. And what animates Adam was Muhammad's light, Muhammad's spirit, Muhammad's soul, a small fragment of it. And then all the prophets received a small fragment of Muhammad's light. So Muhammad is the greatest. He has the greatest amount of light, which is really the Gnostic story of, the eon with the greatest amount of light, and then other eons with lesser amounts of light. The whole Gnostic. So when you said dualistic earlier to me in our discussion, that's also Gnostic. Yeah, that's a Gnostic concept, just wrapped within the Islamic understanding, just adapted to their purpose. But this is why it's important. So this is definitely a religious thing. It comes out of Islam. It's not just a cultural thing. It's actually part of the religious thinking.
Yeah, and there's also the episode in the cave when the angel Gabriel offered Muhammad a glass of wine and a glass of milk, and Muhammad chose the milk, and Gabriel said, "You did well. You have followed the fitra of Allah," because he didn't pick the wine.
Yeah.
So we've got another fatwa here. In fact, in the original slideshow, I think that I've got 10 or 12 of these fatwas. There's many of those fatwas once you start looking at where they associate fitra and female genital mutilation. So
if it's part of the fitra, then it should be essential. Then it should be almost obligatory, because it is part of the fundamental nature of being a Muslim.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Then it's not an optional. I mean, obviously, then you have azma and rukhsa, those who are willing to or able to go through with it, and those who cannot. But ultimately, this means it is an obligatory practice if you want to be a proper Muslim.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so that's the Quran. That's FGM in the Quran. We'll look at a few of the hadiths now. Well, there's so few hadiths that touch on FGM that we can quickly look at all of them. Yeah, if it shouldn't take too long, hopefully. So this is again, this is a Sahih Muslim hadith. Aisha said, the Messenger of Allah said, when anyone sits amidst four parts of the woman and the circumcised parts touch each other, a bath becomes obligatory. So we all know Aisha, poor Aisha, married Muhammad when she was, Muhammad married her when she was 6, and he consummated the marriage when she was 9. There's two euphemisms here. To sit amidst four parts of the woman, and when circumcised parts touch, these are euphemisms for sexual intercourse. And we get circumcised, the word circumcised, from the Arabic khitan. And this is a tacit approval of FGM. And now a tacit approval, I'm sure most of you will know, is when Muhammad witnesses something in some way, a behavior or a belief, and he doesn't criticize it. Now, because Muhammad is perfect, he wouldn't tolerate any imperfection, and the fact that he didn't criticize it shows that this act or belief is at least allowed in Islam. And this is a very similar hadith. It tells the same incident, but it's interesting. So an interesting difference. So Aisha narrated, when the circumcised meets a circumcised, and indeed ghusl is required. Myself and Allah's Messenger did that, so we performed ghusl. And again, it's khitan. Circumcised comes from khitan. And this is another tacit approval, but I would say it's a stronger approval because it's the previous one was Muhammad talking, using the word circumcised. In this one, it's Muhammad actually having sexual intercourse with his wife's mutilated genitals, and he hasn't criticized the fact, he hasn't said that it shouldn't be like that. He's accepted it, so Muhammad has approved of it.
So she's saying she was circumcised. I mean, that's
right. Yeah.
I mean, you realize all of these Sahih hadiths have just suddenly become da'if, brother. As Muslims are going to be letting us know shortly.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. This is one of my favorite hadiths. Well, favorite's not quite the right word, but it's one of the most interesting ones. So we got al-Qama related that when the daughters of Aisha's brother was circumcised, Aisha was asked, "Shall we call someone to amuse them?" "Yes," replied. Adi was sent for, and he came to them. Aisha passed by the room and saw him singing and shaking his head in rapture, and he had a large head of hair. "Uff," she exclaimed, "the shaitan, get him out, get him out." So, okay, note in this hadith, who's being circumcised? It's the daughters of Aisha's brother. It's Aisha's nieces. These are females being, inverted commas, undergoing khitan. And we have Aisha, Muhammad's favorite wife, and you've got Adi, who was a close companion to Muhammad, and they're participating in the cutting, the khitan of these little girls. Now we can ask ourselves a question: was Aisha and Adi doing this against Muhammad's will, behind his back, in secret, or what? I think it's very, very unlikely.
I mean, would the guy be singing loudly if this was a secret?
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's not. I just want to point out to the audience that Al-Adab al-Mufrad is actually a collection of hadiths by Bukhari.
Yeah.
Just that the Sahih Bukhari is the collection of his collection of Sahih hadiths. These are the not Sahih hadiths in Al-Adab al-Mufrad. So this is also written by Bukhari.
And it's also a collection of hadiths that deal with etiquette and polite conduct, you might say. It's very much about how to be a civilized person. So Bukhari considered female genital mutilation as part of being a civilized person in a civilized society, presumably. Oh, it seems that, oh no, here you are. Okay, so here we have another hadith that uses khitan. Circumcision is sunnah for men and makruma, honorable for women. And I'm sure you all know what sunnah means. It's
Sunnah. Yeah.
Sunnah. It's a practice that is in accordance with Muhammad's teachings and Muhammad's example. And yep, it's khitan has been used here. Mm. And then the last khitan hadith is, do not cut severely. A woman used to perform circumcision in Medina. The Prophet said to her, do not cut severely, as that is better for a woman and more desirable for a husband. Now, so do not cut severely. This tells us that there were forms of FGM in Medina, which the Muhammad considered as too severe, and he recommended moderating. It may be that in Medina, infibulation was being practiced, and Muhammad, being Meccan, it was used to clitoridectomy rather than infibulation. We don't know, but I suspect there's lots of different forms of FGM happening in the region at the time. Okay, so So let's just summarize the khitan hadiths, because it's quite important that, you know, we pin down this definition of this word khitan. So there's 2 hadiths where it's girls or women, and only girls or women undergoing khitan. And we've got 3 hadiths where the word khitan is used to refer to both males and females. Okay. And so we go back to this, and we can add to this little flow chart, we can add this. So not only do the dictionaries say that khitan is circumcision of a boy and of a girl, the definition, this definition is confirmed by how khitan is used in the hadiths. Okay, so we'll just have a look at the Khafad hadiths. These are this is a very interesting hadith. Circumcise them and purify them. An old woman from Kufa, the grandmother of Ali ibn Urab, reported that al-Muhajir said, "I was captured with some girls from Byzantium. Uthman offered us Islam, but only myself and one other girl accepted Islam. Uthman said, go and circumcise them and purify them." Okay, so Kufa is a town in present-day Iraq. Means mother in Arabic, which shows that the person speaking was a woman. Byzantium, the fact that these girls were captured from Byzantium shows that they were Christians. And we've got Uthman, who was the 3rd caliph. He was very close to Muhammad. He was his 2nd cousin, and he married, I think, 2 of his daughters. So somebody who knew exactly what Muhammad required, what Islam was required. And finally, purify. So what we can learn from this hadith is that, again, we have Muhammad's closest companions and followers practicing FGM, that women who converted to Islam underwent FGM, that Byzantines or Christians did not practice FGM, and that one of the functions of FGM was purification. Another hadith, the Prophet said, "O women of the Ansar, apply henna and circumcise, but do not exaggerate, for it is more pleasing for your women folks when they are with their husbands." So the Ansar, as I'm sure, again, you know, are those people in Medina who accepted and welcomed the Muslims migrating from Mecca to Medina. They accepted them into their homes. And again, we have Muhammad. This probably reports the same incident as the earlier hadith. Do not cut severely. Muhammad again recommending some form of moderation in the cutting. And this is the final Khafad hadith. This is a very interesting one. Some women who had migrated, and I think this reports the same incident as the previous hadith. Some women who had migrated came to the Messenger of God. One of them was a woman called Habib, who used to circumcise girls. When the Messenger of God saw her, he asked her, "Oh, Habib, are you still engaged in the same trade as before?" She said, "Yes, O Messenger of God, unless it is forbidden and you order me to stop doing it." He said, "No, it is halal. Come close and I will teach you." She said she approached him and he said, "Oh, Habib, if you cut, do not overdo it. Namely, do not cut everything, and ash me, for it brightens a face and is more pleasant for the husband." Okay, so halal means lawful, allowed. These women had migrated, so these are Meccan women. Do not overdo it. We've seen that before.
Was this applied to slaves or just to Muslim women? Probably just Muslim women, right?
No, actually, that's a very interesting question, because the word girls is jawari. Now, if you go to I can't remember which dictionaries I checked, but there are 3 definitions which separate out. One is woman, one is girl, and one is female slave. So it could be who used to circumcise female slaves. And I've got a hypothesis that there was a different form of female genital mutilation practiced on free women, Muslim women, that was probably clitoridectomy, but on slaves, that it may have been infibulation. And this ties up with the African slave trade, which was already quite well established at the time, where slaves brought over from Africa were infibulated, because infibulation is a way of preserving the financial, the monetary value of the slaves, because it protects them from being raped in the long trek to Saudi Arabia. So that's a whole other question. But it is interesting that they use the word, the original is Jawari, and it depends on how you interpret it, really.
Yeah, I see here in the Encyclopedia of the Quran, I'm just having a look at, they speak here of the Arabic term. There's also khatna, Khatna. I see that.
Oh, yeah. I think that's got the root, the khitan root, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's the Asian. So it looks like in Pakistan, India, that part of the world, they use the term khatna.
Okay.
Then they speak of khitan, and then also tahara, meaning purity.
Yeah, yeah.
And they speak of the term for female circumcision. They use the term khaft, Kha. Actually, let me just share my screen for a second.
Yeah, I'll just stop sharing.
This is from the Encyclopedia of the Quran. I just did a search for circumcision using my software. And they speak of male circumcision, khitan, and then tahara, purity, and khaft, reduction of the clitoris.
Yeah, yeah.
And circumcision, it says here, circumcision of either type is nowhere mentioned in the Quran, but that's a misleading statement. That's a bit ambiguous.
As we've
but
seen,
was practiced by pre-Islamic Arabs and is mentioned in poetry. See pre-Islamic Arabia and the Quran, poetry and poets. And there are two Quranic occurrences of the plural form of an Arabic term, akhlaf or khulf, which that can mean uncircumcised.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's definitely there. So it's definitely within these sources of Islam. So it's, I mean, I just started looking through this now, but I'm sure if I index and I start downloading the relevant texts and index them with my software, I will start finding lots of usages of this.
Oh, interesting.
This is very disturbing. I mean, it's clearly part of the culture. It's clearly part of the religion. It's part of the tradition.
Well, FGM was practiced before Islam. It certainly was, because Aisha was cut before the Hijra. We'll see. We're going to see another hadith now, where we'll see that the Meccans, which tells us what the Meccans, what kind of FGM the Meccans practiced. I'll just So this is an extract from a longer hadith, long hadith. I'll just explain a couple of things. It talks about a battle, and that's the Battle of Uhud, which took place 3 years after the Hijra. And we've got two characters. We've got Siba, who was a Meccan warrior, so an enemy of Muhammad and the Muslims, and we've got Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib, who was a companion of Muhammad. So the hadith goes, I went out with the people for the battle. When the army aligned for the fight, Siba came out and said, is there any Muslim to accept my challenge to a duel? Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib came out and said, O Siba, O Ibn Ammar, the one who circumcises other ladies, do you challenge Allah and his apostles? Now, this is a translation in, I can't remember who the translation is, but it's the Darussalam translation. It's a misleading translation. This phrase, "Oh Ibn Ammar, the one who circumcises of ladies," it's not a correct. It's not correct. It should actually be, "O son of Mother Ammar, she who cuts the clitoris." So if you remember, this is 3 years after the Hijra, and it's an exchange of taunts between a Muslim and a Meccan warrior. And this Siba is a son of a female circumciser. And we learn what it was that the Meccans did. They cut the clitoris. They practiced clitoridectomy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why do Muslims, I mean, we know why, but it's like, why do they bother to lie about this? I mean, it's
because nobody has done, look, I mean, my research has been a case of picking low-hanging fruit for the most part. All this is just out there waiting to be put together, and what this is what's amazed me. That it's all out there. This isn't secret. You can find most of this sort of in QuranX or Sunnah.com. Most of these hadiths are just there. You just need to look, but nobody's really been. Even people like Ayan Hirsi Ali, these campaigners, they're not putting this together properly. They seem to be avoiding coming to these conclusions. They don't want FGM to be Islamic, and there's good reason for that, because most of these charities that are against FGM, good luck to them, and of course I support them. But imagine being one of these charity workers in front of a group of Somalian women who are going to circumcise, going to cut their daughters, and one of them says, "Is FGM Islamic?" Well, what do you tell them? Do you tell them the truth and say, "Well, yeah, it's indirectly advocated in the Quran. It's in all these hadiths." Do you tell them that? If you tell them the truth, they're going to be even more determined to do it. So you have to lie. You have to lie. And this is a policy of all these charities, of UNICEF, etc. It's to lie about the nature of FGM because they perceive that as the best way of combating FGM. They might be right. Goodness knows. I suspect that they're not. But I think they're motivated by good intentions.
The road to hell is paved with that stuff, right?
Oh yeah, very much so.
I see here fasad. So the term phlebotomist, of all things, I've finally learned what the term phlebotomist means. In Islamic society, the practitioner of fasad, who bled the veins of the human body and performed circumcisions for men and women. This is from the Encyclopedia of Islam, which is the gold standard universal encyclopedia for Islam. So the fasad. So, yeah.
I hadn't heard that before, fasad. Right. Well, I'll just finish this off. I think
we'll just go back to you.
Yeah, we're pretty much at the end of this one. Yeah, so
so this is pretty much a slam dunk what you have here. I mean, it's quite clear.
Oh yeah,
that this was part of the practice of Islam.
And it's there. It's in. You can see it in their culture. You can see it in in the pre-Islamic culture. These Meccans were practicing. These weren't Muslims practicing it. These are sort of the pagan Meccans. But it was there. It was present, and Muhammad continued the practice. Okay, so oops, my slide's gone a bit funny, but it doesn't matter. I'll just quickly summarize the conclusions, and then I'll free the screen. So, Quran 30:30 indirectly advocates FGM. Muhammad explicitly advocated some form of FGM. Muhammad also tacitly approved of FGM. Muhammad considered some forms of FGM excessive and advised against them. Muhammad did not criticize or forbid FGM. Muhammad's native tribe practiced FGM, or the Meccans at least. Muhammad's companions and followers practiced FGM, and no companion of Muhammad forbade, condemned, or criticized FGM. One of Muhammad's wife, Aisha, is known to have undergone FGM. FGM was normative in Muhammad's Medina. Islamic FGM had some element of purification. Women who converted to Islam underwent FGM, and Christians did not practice FGM. Okay, so I hope that wasn't too well.
No, not at all. I mean, it's necessary. It's uncomfortable, but it is necessary. I mean, I'm also finding that it seems to have influenced like African tribes who borrowed the ideas from Islam, so that people living around Muslims affected by them also adopted some of these practices.
Well, it's hard to. Okay, so that's an interesting thing to talk about, the history of FGM, because the first record of FGM is dates to 2000 BC. It's it's an inscription on an Egyptian coffin, and then we have got records from Herodotus. Although Herodotus is a bit ambiguous what he's talking about, but for Egypt, he did see. We think he saw FGM in Egypt and possibly further south on the Red Sea. Then you've got other historians from the Ptolemaic period, the Greek period, and the Roman period, witnessing FGM, Egypt, Turkey, and down the coast of the Red Sea. So this is before Islam. So yes, FGM did exist before Islam in the area. We don't know what happens in Saudi Arabia now. This is a case of observer bias, because the Greeks and the Romans were great scholars and recorders of what they were interested in other cultures, and they recorded what they saw. They didn't really get that much into Saudi Arabia, into Arabia. So we don't have any records of what happened.
Saudi wouldn't be, being the home of Islam, it wouldn't want to sully the idea of Islam. So it's going to be very, shall we say, circumspect about releasing any numbers.
No, but there's no pre-Islamic records of FGM being practiced in Arabia. If you define Arabia really as the Hijaz and that sort of level, I haven't found any anyway. Now, as to what's happening in Saudi Arabia now, there's only really two sources of data about FGM in Saudi Arabia. There's a very interesting study conducted. It's actually quite a small town in on the west coast. It's called Hali in the I think it's called the Kunfunda province, where they did a cross-sectional study, which means they take the city, they draw a line through it, and they interview every woman, or as many women as possible, living in the houses on that line.
Mm-hmm.
And they found 81% of them had undergone FGM. Now, this is self-reported.
Wow.
They didn't actually check the organs themselves. 81%. But then there's another study which is much harder to interpret. It's actually a hospital-based study, a gynecology department. So there's already a selection bias, some sort of selection bias going on, where they found that now I think it's 17% of Saudi Arabian women in the clinic had undergone FGM. 17. So there's a huge gap between the two. Now, over two studies, the Harley study is it was conducted to find out how many. It was conducted for purposes of finding out how many women in that town were cut, whereas this study conducted in the Jeddah hospitals in Jeddah wasn't conducted to really give a prevalence statistic. It was conducted for other reasons. But the thing with Jeddah, the population of Jeddah is very diluted. It's a port town for Mecca.
I've been to Jeddah a couple of times.
Yeah. Well, apparently I've never been to Jeddah, but apparently a significant proportion, maybe the majority of the population, have origins, non-Saudi origins. These are pilgrims who came to do the Hajj and stayed. So what are you getting? If you remember, it's 24% of Muslims worldwide who practice FGM. So the more you get worldwide Muslims living in the region, in Jeddah or in Mecca, the FGM rates will tend to move towards that 24%. If the general rate for FGM in Saudi Arabia is 81%, which somehow I doubt, but it will tend to dilute that 81% lower and lower. But 17% seems very low. It seems it's lower than the global average for Muslims. So I'm not sure what's going on there. I'm not sure what's going on.
It's tough.
Yeah, and Lloyd, if you ever come across any information or data which could help me on that, I'd be very grateful.
I mean, yeah, one would have to. I mean, there may be ways and means to dig. I've just been haphazardly looking through, using my software to dig through my references. This is the term khittan. This is in volume 13. That's the index volume of the Encyclopedia of Islam. And khittan is male circumcision, but khittanan, the plural, the two circumcised parts that are the male and the female.
Well, this is a dual noun, isn't it? This is a dual noun. And it's interesting, the Hadith, where two circumcisions meet, there's people who I call the delinkers. You've got delinkers who are kafir, and we've got delinkers who are Muslims. These are people who want to separate Islam and FGM, and they'll say that the use of a dual noun, it's a poetic use where I think they have the two suns or the two moons. In the Quran, it says a two moons somewhere, referring to the sun and the moon. Sometimes this dual noun construction can be used in a poetic way, having two different things. And they're claiming that this is what this hadith is. It's a poetic use. And in fact, there was a circumcised male and the uncircumcised female genitals, but they're using this poetic usage of a dual noun.
Yeah, well, this is obviously the Encyclopedia of Islam, which again is the premier gold standard Islamic resource worldwide at universities. So this is over a century old. It's been, I don't know which edition, it's in the 3rd edition or something now, but it's been updated, but it's constantly updated. It costs to purchase a copy for university to buy it, I think it's about $45,000.
Wow.
And to rent it is about $5,000 a year, which includes an annual update fee. So this is expensive. This is top notch. And it is also, it's not just a work of the decadent Western Orientalists who hate Islam. It's a major work with thousands of contributors over more than a century. And if you read through who the contributors are, you'll see half the names are Muslim. So, which of course you've got to be careful because some sections are whitewashed and things are, a little buried. But that said, I mean, khitanan. So, and then also as I'm looking through this, I'm also finding other terms. Like we just had that fasad, whatever it was, the person who does it. So as I would do things like this, right? As I will go through sources like this, what my software allows me to do is to find related terms, find names, terms, ideas that are related, and then I can go look up those terms. And then, because the thing is, you'll find different spellings in different cultures. In Pakistan, they'll spell it differently, right? Or the word will be similar or different. So I can then pick up all these different terms, like they'll have synonyms, they'll have euphemisms, they'll have whatever it might be. And then I can start looking up those terms. I can go through my 2,000-3,000 references, and this software within 1 second is going to find that term through every source that I have. And then once I've found the term and I've narrowed it down, I can go download additional sources that would speak more specifically on it, add that to my collection, index those, and then I can build a much more complete picture because I can hone in on specific terms, names, words, and then or phrases, and then boom, I'll pick up, a lot of detail like that. So if I go, for instance, to look up the same term here, I don't know if it will exist here in this one, but this means we can, instead of looking for just khitan, for instance, we can now look up variations in spelling. We can look up different terms in different countries, and we can look up other words that are similar, synonyms, for instance. So, there was plenty of discussion I saw on celebrations of circumcisions. So there would be circumcision parties and celebrations. So hold on, let's have a look here. Let me see, bloodletting. Again, bloodletting, not the first time. See, fasad. See, we just had fasad earlier. Yeah, now we have bloodletting again, which is another one of those medieval practices which Islam wants to continue with. Okay, we have fasad. And then, of course, the care of children. And in the case of surgery, now you've got jarrah and khitan.
Khitan, okay, yeah.
Now, it's interesting. Now you have another word to look up. Now you've got to eliminate this word and see if it's relevant or not. So now you've got to look. Now, for instance, jarrah, would jarrah be with one R or two R's? With a D, without the D, just the J alone? Now you've got to look up variations as well. Right? So now you've got to Google, you've got to go. So this is the process I have to go through. Wow. And you might find that in the west half of the world, they use the term jarrah. In the right half of the world, they use khitan. And in Pakistan, they use a different word completely. So this is the kind of process I have to go through. But this way I can then I can go online, find books talking about this, download those papers, download those references, find the relevant Islamic scholars, find the relevant papers, drop those in my index in a folder, index that, and then I can start churning through those.
Wow, that looks really useful. I'll have to pop down to my local bookshop and buy it. I'll sell my house first, but
No. I can give you a copy of the Encyclopedia of Islam. It's in my archive. You can do that. But that said, the software that I use here, this Copernic, this costs about $25 a year.
Okay.
For the license.
Well, yeah, I'd be very interested in that. So let's make that happen. I can afford that. Yeah, I can afford it better than actually buying the
Oh no, I
encyclopedia?
can give you a set of the. We can actually give you the Encyclopedia of Islam as well. So I can give you the PDF copy that I have. Oddly enough, came from the University of Tehran.
Okay, is it still in existence?
Who knows? But either here they've got circumcision. So basically, I then have to go through every reference that I find. See, circumcisions are performed at the Ziwaya, whatever this means, on the first day of the Mawlid. A night meeting called Layla is held on the eve of this day. Layla, obviously, that would be a reference to Laylat al-Qadr, the night of power. So that would be some sort of link to that. But what's interesting is the Laylat al-Qadr, and just the way that these associations work. The Laylat, if you think about Laylat, in English, we would refer to the term Lilith. Now you get a link to the word Lilith. Laylat al-Qadr, the night of power. But then you think, now what's the link between this Islamic event and Lilith, who's supposedly like a demon woman, the first wife of Adam? And then you start digging into the mythology that connects the two. And then Islam, once you start digging into Islam, where it gets its ideas, the connections it has, because then you go into the Sufis, and the Sufis tell you that Allah actually has two aspects, an exterior and an interior. I mean, he's got multiple different aspects, but in this case, Allah's internal core is female. Okay. You get these crazy claims, and then you're like, okay, now who is his female aspect? Well, it's just insane as you start digging in. But anyway, let's just have a quick look at circumcision again. There's a reference here to another reference to circumcision I found here somewhere. Especially circumcision, the completion. So we give feasts for circumcision. I've come across several references now to feasts for circumcision.
Yeah.
I don't know if women get it, but the boys certainly do.
Well, so I'm at the moment I'm studying quite closely the history of Coptic female genital mutilation and circumcision, male circumcision as well, because there's a sort of rule, and I'm not sure if this rule is 100%. It'd be interesting I'm testing it, that you never get FGM. You only ever get FGM when there's male circumcision as well. So I'm tracing the history of Coptic male circumcision, and they gave it up around, I think it's around the 3rd century AD, which, if it's true that you never get female circumcision unless there's male circumcision being practiced, it means the Copts gave up. I need to go back a little bit. Female genital mutilation has been practiced in Egypt pretty much throughout all of its history, except possibly during the Coptic period. And the Copts abandoned it at some point. That's my hypothesis. There's no evidence of it being practiced for about 3 or 4 centuries. And then there's the Islamic invasion, the occupation, and they readopted it under the Islamic occupation, under pressure of persecution, under the Ayyubids. Sorry, I'm trying to think where it's come. Yeah, so celebrations. Yes, there's definitely. It looks like there's some evidence that in the Greek, in Greek Egypt. So this is I can't remember the date. Something like 3rd century BC to the 1st century BC. I think roughly that time, that there were celebrations for female genital mutilations. But the evidence isn't very strong, but it looks like there might have been. Now, after that, there isn't. And the reason is that FGM, it's a practical procedure. It's not, it's religious because it's advocated by Islam, but it solves a problem. It solves a problem caused by polygyny. And it's more like, the way it's done, it's more like taking a child. Okay, imagine you're a Victorian and you have to take your child to the dentist to have her tooth pulled. You know she's going to suffer, but it's for her good. And it's more like the way it's conducted is like that. It's like taking a child to the dentist for an unpleasant operation. There's no ritual, there's no ceremony. It's done in a very functional manner. It's not the same for male circumcision. We do have celebrations for male circumcision.
Right. I just came across this in the Encyclopedia of Islam, Volume 12. It speaks of fasad and hajjam, two terms denoting a blood letter. Fasad, literally phlebotomist, and hajjam, cupper. Oh, that's cupping, where they use a vacuum and they put it on the back, just below the neck, and then they suck out the blood, like the bad blood or something, to remove toxins. And these are similar professions. Some pseudo-scientific books on phlebotomy and bloodletting were written by reputable physicians in the Abbasid Baghdad in the 3rd, 9th century. That's 9th century for us. And they wrote the book of Kitab al-Fasid, al-Hajjama, or Hijama, book of phlebotomy and bloodletting. And they speak here of, published in 1955, actually, oddly. And they said the phlebotomist was required by customary law to be learned and reliable in the anatomy of organs, veins, muscles, and arteries. And he practiced the craft in consultation with a physician. They bled the veins of the human body and performed circumcision for men as well as women in Arab society.
Right. Okay, yeah. Wow.
It involved some hazards. Many persons actually died as a result. Arab customary law made the fasad liable to pay compensation in the event of injury or death.
Oh, wow.
And this was why the Muhtasib stipulated that the fasadun should practice their craft in public places, keep a number of their instruments, including lancets, in good conditions. And Abu Hanifa said this was a recommendable practice. It was sunnah.
Okay.
If it's sunnah, then it should be done. Not compulsory, but others regarded it as compulsory. So there you go.
Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. So yeah. So this was taking place. Where was this taking place?
3rd century of Islam, 9th century for us. 270. Here you go. You've got 279 AH or 892 AD.
Yeah. Okay.
857 AD. You've got another references there. So this goes way back.
Oh, so yeah, we're talking about Baghdad there, aren't they?
Yeah, Baghdad, correct.
Okay.
Yes, I can try and zoom in a little bit more without losing the place, but there you go.
I got a bit excited there. I saw Cairo, but that's where it was published.
Yeah, it was published. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this means this was standard Islamic practice. And I'm sure if I look, I'll find more of this stuff because, I'm just looking up. So you find Kitab al-Fasid. So now you can look this up. Now I've got the name of a resource. Now you've got to find the resource and you've got to look through the resource. It's going to teach you more because now you've got an official book on the matter. Wow. And this is what my software allows me to do. Within minutes, or seconds, sometimes if I'm lucky, I can find dozens of references and then sort through those.
That's brilliant. That's smashing. I think that'll keep me busy for a few weeks exploring that. Yeah, that'll be great. Yeah.
So this is very helpful for this kind of thing because now you have a bunch of names. You've got Ishaq bin Umran. Like, who is that? He wrote a medical treatise called Kitab al-Fasid. So now you got this guy. Now you look up, you can Google for references to the guy. Of course, the spelling Ishak might be different. He might be he might be 2 S's and no H. He might be a Q and no K. It's,
Yeah, Arabic transliterates with difficulty into our alphabet.
Yeah, but you understand that this allows me to find things. Blood letter, fasad, interesting. So this allows me to find things, and then you can actually enhance your understanding of it by going through legitimate sources and finding necessary references. Because I'm just digging, it's finding me every reference to fasad in volume 13 of the Encyclopedia of Islam. So we've just been through that one. Let's have a look here. What did it find? Fasad, medicine, bleeding. So it's the same as a bleeder. We did bleeding in the Middle Ages. We gave that up.
Yeah, it was based on the medical philosophy of Galen.
Yeah, well, then you can also tell where they're getting their ideas from.
Yeah.
So hijama comes there as well. Hijama, slightly different spelling, but you have the same kind of guy, the blood letter, and there you go. So these terms come up. So it gives you can then broaden your search, but also focus, or at least you can broaden the number of places you can look, but focus in those places.
Well, that's great. I'll accept your offer, Lloyd, your very kind offer, and you can send me all the volumes of the encyclopedia in the post.
Yep, and then I'll just link those to you, and then you just need to get a copy of. I can get you like a 20% discount on the cost of the software. You might pay between $17 and $20
Yeah, that's
for the
reasonable.
software.
Yeah.
For Copernic, so that I can do, because I pay for it. I use it because this is indispensable to the work that I'm doing.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be very useful. It's finding all these obscure references. It's it's always very exciting when you find a new reference and you dig into it. It's such a lovely process,
because then you can pull it from Islamic sources. You see, I can then you can download whole tons. You can download like all the PDFs you can find, dump them in a folder, tell the software index that, and then you can start like, hold on, here you've got Islamic reference after Islamic reference after Islamic reference. It's not just hadiths that are weak. It's look at this scholar, 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 this book, this book, this book, this book from this period, this place. It's like you can just overwhelm them with the facts, because then it's it's unarguable.
That's smashing. That's great.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we've probably sort of finished the topic, I guess, right? I mean, you introduced the topic.
Yeah. I mean, it would be interesting to. I don't want to impose myself. Sure. I always think as a guest, one should one should leave before one host had enough of one. But maybe if you'd be interested. There's a couple of topics which would be interesting, maybe at some future date, if you've got the time and inclination. And one is to talk about polygyny. And so FGM is a solution to the problems caused by polygyny. There are many other practices such as veiling, honor violence, gender seclusion. And in fact, an argument can be made that almost all of Islam is a consequence of polygyny, whether it's cousin marriage, arranged marriage, child marriage, hijra, immigration, jihad, despotism, bride price. These are all logical consequences of what happens when you have a polygynous kinship system. Maybe, if that might be interesting.
Look, yeah, no, Saturday nights are best for you, right? Saturdays are the best time for you, you said. I have Sundays, but Sundays are tough. So I can do like the 19th of July, because I have spoken to Thunderous about, so then I can move Thunderous to the 26th and I can take that. And so potentially the 19th, that's Saturday the 19th, I'm available again. That's the next date that I have on a Saturday where I can accommodate this. And otherwise we'd have to move it into August. But the 19th. If we can do a Friday, then I can do like the 25th.
Well, 19th is fine. It's fine by me. Yeah.
So that would be so for the audience, what do you guys think of this? I mean, just the statistical graphs. I mean, just the numbers that he had, the one graph with the populations relative to FGM practice. I mean, that just is the nail in the coffin right there, I think. That really just clinches it. It's they just lie about everything. But then it reminds me of the X-Files, where the smoking man always says, deny everything.
Deny everything until it becomes useful not to deny it.
Yeah.
And that's
it's the Trojan horse.
Yeah. Well, what happens is by denying things like child marriage, FGM, jihad, people think Islam is not as worrying, not as at odds with our civilization as it actually is. So people drop their defenses. People have got to know.
Yeah.
People have got to know.
Sorry. Go on, sorry.
No, it was just that Islam is a wolf in sheep's clothing.
No, agreed.
Until it's established itself, and then it can take the sheep's clothing off.
Yeah. Just so, by the way, I mentioned a couple of things earlier. It says here, "O Messenger, when was the prophethood established? When did Muhammad become a prophet? Well, Adam was between soul and body. Well, Adam was still unmade."
Wow.
Okay. So Muhammad became a prophet because Muhammad was the first thing that Allah created.
Okay.
So if you look for reference to Adam, sorry. The first thing which Allah created was my light and my spirit. You see?
Wow.
And then, of course, Muhammad, the Muhammad of pre-existence, because Muhammad pre-existed creation, because Muhammad is a deity, part of Allah's divine being, made of the same essence, homoousios. He was created of divine light. Allah created Adam from the light of Muhammad. And then he created Adam from the clay of divine might, from the light of Muhammad. Not only is Adam formed from Muhammad's light, just so you know, just so the audience can see that from the Islamic sources, I wasn't making that up.
Wow, that's really something. It puts paid to the idea that Islam is a monotheistic religion.
No, Muhammad is basically Jesus, and he's like John 1:1. They're basically copying. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was Muhammad, and the Word was with Allah, and Muhammad was with Allah. That's pretty much where they're at.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. No, you read the Sirah, and it's unmistakable. It's obvious. So
that's shocking.
No, they surely worship Muhammad. That much is true.
Oh yeah.
So thank you. That was very interesting. So certainly let's talk again on the next topic, because it's disturbing, it's uncomfortable. I'm sure many are not comfortable dealing with it, but it's the truth. That's what we have to talk about. So that was well worth discussing. Disturbing, but necessary, I think.
Well, thanks very much, Lloyd. It's been a great pleasure, and I hope your viewers and you have learned something, and hope they're inspired to spread the message.
Yeah, let's hope so, guys. Talk about this, use these details, use this information, and please drop your comments down below. Let us know what you found useful. Let us know how you think you can use this. Get it out there. We need to talk about this. We need to make this public discussion, because once it's out there, once the cat's out of the bag, it should spread. It will go viral. Clearly, they're suppressing information, but once it's out there, it's about quantity. Not always. It's often about who is listening, who is getting this information, and just do what you can. I know we don't have billions of dollars. We don't own a newspaper. We can't, but do what you can. Speak about this. Bring it to the attention of others. It'll trickle through. And remember that little grains of sand eventually become an avalanche. Little flakes of snow eventually become an avalanche. So I think that's all we need. Little drops of rain become a flood. And if you want to grind the gears, grains of sand in your gearbox, well, eventually you will grind those gears. So to a halt. So just do what you can, speak about this. And thank you, Julian. Much appreciated.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Lloyd. Thank you very much.
So take care, everyone. Good night. God bless. And we'll see you guys soon. Good night.